Are you exhausted from fighting a war against invisible shadows in your feed? You are not alone, and you are not failing. You are simply measuring your sovereign divine calling against a synthetic ghost. We are dismantling the psychological traps of modern comparison culture, the invisible cages that turn your high calling into a desperate race for digital approval. Stop letting an artificial intelligence script your worth. Stop trading the profound silence of your destiny for the deafening noise of the crowd. How chosen ones overcome the psychological traps of modern digital comparison culture. Part 1. The Architecture of the Algorithmic Mirror. Welcome to the era of the algorithmic mirror. When you unlock your device, you are not looking at reality. You are looking at a highly weaponized, mathematically optimized reflection. This reflection is designed by behavioral engineers with one singular objective: to capture and commodify your most valuable, finite asset, your attention. To understand the profound psychological traps of modern digital comparison, we must first dismantle the architecture of the environment in which these traps are laid. You cannot defeat an enemy you do not understand. And the first step to reclaiming the bandwidth required for your sovereign purpose is recognizing this digital battlefield for what it truly is: a matrix of engineered envy, decoding the false baseline of human success. We are living through an unprecedented epoch. As we navigate the generative artificial intelligence boom of 2026, the internet has fundamentally mutated. It is no longer merely a decentralized repository of human experiences. It has become an industrial factory of synthetic perfection. We have moved far beyond the primitive days of simple photo filters or selectively curated highlight reels. The feeds you scroll through today are increasingly populated by hyper-curated, artificially enhanced, and algorithmically generated realities that literally do not exist in the physical world. This hyperreality creates a deeply insidious psychological phenomenon: the establishment of a false baseline for human success. Consider the mechanics of human perception. Your brain relies on environmental cues to establish what is normal. When your feed continuously, relentlessly serves you imagery of 20-something billionaires, flawless relationships, digitally rendered aesthetics, and frictionless overnight successes, your subconscious mind slowly surrenders. It accepts this extreme statistical anomaly as the new standard of existence. And here is where the fracture occurs. You begin to measure your messy, non-linear, and inherently human progression against a baseline of success that is impossible to achieve because it is not real. The algorithmic mirror does not reflect who you are. It reflects what the machine calculates will trigger your deepest insecurities and desires. It learns your specific aspirations. It tracks your desire for spiritual impact, your search for financial freedom, your pursuit of physical health. And then it feeds you impossible, friction-free standards of those exact metrics. You are forced into a psychological deficit before you even step out of bed in the morning. For the chosen ones, those who carry a heavy divine mandate, this false baseline is particularly lethal. It tricks you into believing that because your journey involves struggle, delay, and hidden seasons of preparation, you are somehow failing the test of life. Hear this clearly: you are not failing. You are simply comparing a raw, organic, sovereign process to a machine-optimized illusion. The psychological fatigue of the machine-optimized aesthetic. There is a specific, crushing fatigue that occurs when a divine calling is forced to measure itself against a machine-optimized aesthetic. A divine calling is born in the wilderness. It requires seasons of profound silence. It demands isolation, the death of the ego, and raw, unpolished obedience. The architecture of a true calling is fundamentally, violently incompatible with the demands of the modern attention economy. The algorithm demands constant visibility, flawless execution, and immediate, quantifiable validation. The spirit demands patience, depth, and unseen roots. When you attempt to force a profound spiritual mission into the restrictive mold of a social media algorithm, you fracture your own psyche. You experience a profound, paralyzing psychological exhaustion because you are attempting to run two incompatible operating systems simultaneously: the slow, deep, generational work of your calling and the frantic, shallow, dopamine-driven demands of the feed. The machine-optimized aesthetic dictates that every waking moment must be capitalized upon, documented, monetized, and polished for public consumption. But true spiritual authority cannot be life-hacked. It cannot be expedited by an artificial intelligence prompt. It cannot be scheduled in a content calendar. When you measure your internal spiritual growth by external engagement metrics, you invite a devastating imposter syndrome into your sanctuary. You look at peers who seem to be scaling the heights of digital influence effortlessly, seamlessly blending their spirituality with marketability, and a quiet, terrifying voice whispers that you have been left behind. This fatigue is the result of cognitive dissonance. Your soul knows it is built for a marathon of generational impact, but your nervous system is being hijacked by a platform demanding a sprint for daily dopamine. The exhaustion you feel is not a lack of capability, and it is not a lack of anointing. It is the friction of your sovereign identity resisting the sterile silicon mold of digital conformity. To overcome this, you must accept a radical, liberating truth. Your calling is not meant to look like their feed. The aesthetic of the divine is often entirely invisible to the algorithm. Digital envy is a strategic distraction. We must shift our perspective from passive psychological endurance to tactical, martial awareness. Digital envy is not merely a character flaw. It is not just a temporary lapse in gratitude or a sign of weak faith. Digital envy is a strategic distraction deployed specifically to keep you disconnected from your unique spiritual frequency. Consider the mechanics of warfare. If a hostile force wanted to prevent you from fulfilling a world-changing mandate, it would not necessarily need to destroy you physically. It would only need to distract you long enough for the window of opportunity to close. The algorithmic mirror is the ultimate weapon of mass distraction. It hijacks your emotional bandwidth, forcing you to expend immense, irreplaceable cognitive energy analyzing the perceived success of strangers. Every minute you spend envying the curated, filtered life of another is a minute stolen directly from the execution of your own purpose. This is the great silent tragedy of modern comparison culture. It turns visionaries into voyeurs. Instead of building the empire you were tasked with, instead of writing the manuscript that will heal a generation, instead of cultivating the deep spiritual authority you were called to, you are relegated to the sidelines. You become a spectator to the synthetic lives of others. You begin to mimic the frequencies of those you envy, abandoning your own authentic, powerful voice in a desperate bid for the same algorithmic approval. But you possess a unique spiritual frequency. There is a specific resonance of truth, a unique signature of creativity and leadership that only you can broadcast into the physical world. When you tune your mind into the static of digital envy, your own signal drops out. You cannot hear the quiet, specific, strategic instructions meant for your individual path, while the deafening noise of the global crowd is ringing in your ears. Overcoming this requires brutal clarity. The people you are comparing yourself to are often trapped in the exact same algorithmic prison, performing for the same invisible silicon masters. To reclaim your frequency, you must shatter the algorithmic mirror. You must recognize that the digital landscape is not a true reflection of spiritual reality, but a distorted funhouse designed to keep you lost, envious, and perpetually scrolling. Your high calling requires a high level of discernment. It is time to stop measuring the weight of your divine glory on the broken scales of a digital platform. Part 2. The high cost of social validation. Having dismantled the architecture of the algorithmic mirror, we must now examine the currency that sustains it, social validation. The digital landscape operates on an invisible, ruthless economy where human attention is the raw material and validation is the product. For those stepping into a sovereign calling, understanding the mechanics of this economy is not merely a matter of digital wellness or productivity, it is a matter of spiritual survival. You cannot serve a high calling while remaining a slave to the crowd's applause. The neurological hijack, dopamine versus destiny. At the core of digital comparison culture lies a profound biological hijacking. We are not just fighting a philosophical or spiritual battle, we are fighting a neurochemical war. The platforms we engage with daily are entirely engineered by behavioral psychologists to weaponize the human brain's reward system. Every notification, every like, every view, and every follower count update operates on what psychologists call a variable reward schedule, the exact same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines so violently addictive. When you post an update, an image, or a piece of your work, your brain releases a surge of dopamine in anticipation of the crowd's response. This tricks the brain into conflating the approval of strangers with actual, substantive achievement. For the chosen one, this is a lethal substitution. You are wired for a sovereign mission, a destiny that requires deep focus, prolonged effort, and the fortitude to stand entirely alone in the dark while you build. But the dopamine loop rewires your neurocircuitry to crave cheap, immediate, and effortless thrills. It makes the slow, unglamorous work of true creation feel agonizing. The tragic conflict arises when your divine mandate is delayed, as it always is during seasons of preparation, and your brain desperately seeks a shortcut to feeling successful. You look at the algorithmic mirror and see others receiving instant gratification. Subconsciously, you begin to alter your message, dilute your truth, and perform for the algorithm just to trigger that dopamine hit. You trade the structural integrity of your birthright for the fleeting high of a notification. You must recognize this not as a moral failing, but as a physiological trap. The approval of strangers on a screen is a ghost calorie. It fills the ego but utterly starves the spirit. It gives the illusion of nourishment while leaving you dangerously malnourished for the journey ahead. To execute a world-changing mandate, you must deliberately break the addiction to public applause. You must be willing to endure the neurochemical withdrawal of being misunderstood, unseen, and unvalidated by the masses, so that you can rebuild your appetite for destiny. The paradox of isolation in a hyperconnected world. This brings us to one of the most painful, paradoxical realities of the modern era. We have never been more connected, yet we have never been more intensely isolated. For individuals carrying a unique spiritual weight, this isolation is magnified tenfold. You are existing in a digital ecosystem that facilitates constant high-speed communication but almost zero actual communion. The mechanics of this are simple yet devastating. Social networks thrive on shallow connectivity. They're designed for quick exchanges, transactional interactions, and parasocial relationships where the illusion of intimacy masks a terrifying void of real substance. When you operate on a deeper spiritual frequency, you inherently repel the superficial. You crave covenant, depth, and profound philosophical or spiritual alignment. Yet, when you look around the digital public square, you see a relentless high-speed parade of triviality, outrage, and vanity. This creates an agonizing friction within the soul. The chosen one often looks at the hyper-connected crowd and feels a crushing sense of alienation. You wonder why you cannot seamlessly integrate into the trending conversations, why your soul feels inexplicably heavy in spaces where others seem so impossibly light. You watch peers form digital cliques and celebrate shallow milestones, and a quiet panic sets in. Is there something wrong with me? Why do I feel so alone in a room of 8 billion people? The world interprets this isolation as a social deficit. Ancient wisdom interprets it as a prerequisite for revelation. Throughout human history, the desert, the wilderness, and the solitary place have always been the incubators for divine instruction. You are not isolated because you are flawed, and you are not disconnected because you are failing. You are isolated because your spirit is actively rejecting a shallow environment that cannot sustain the weight of what you are meant to carry. Do not despise the quiet. It is in this profound, disconnected, terrifying silence that the noise of the world fades and your true instructions are finally heard. shifting the internal metric from public engagement to private integrity. If we are to survive the psychological toll of this environment, we must fundamentally dismantle and rebuild our internal metrics for success. The digital age has democratized influence, but in doing so, it has corrupted the measurement of truth. We have allowed engagement metrics, views, likes, shares, and subscriber counts to become the ultimate arbiters of value. We must expose the fatal flaw in this logic. Public engagement metrics are easily manipulated and inherently flawed. They are driven by rage bait, echo chambers, algorithmic bias, and the lowest common denominator of human emotion. The algorithm does not measure the truth, depth, or transformational power of your message. It measures its friction. It rewards what causes a reaction, not what causes a resurrection. When a chosen one aligns their self-worth with these metrics, they willingly step onto a treadmill of spiritual compromise. The ego screams for the numbers, demanding visibility as proof of anointing. The tension between wanting to be effective in your calling and wanting to be seen by the algorithm can tear a visionary apart. You begin to question your mandate simply because it did not go viral. To overcome this, you must radically, violently shift your internal metric of success from public engagement to private spiritual alignment and integrity. The most powerful forces in the universe, gravity, atomic bonds, the tectonic shifts of the earth, operate entirely in the unseen. A seed does not measure its success by how many people watch it germinate in the dark dirt. It measures its success by its rigid obedience to its own DNA. Your new metric must be obedience, not optics. Did you hold the line on your integrity today? Did you execute the quiet, unglamorous work of your calling when absolutely no cameras were rolling? Did you refuse to compromise your message for a wider reach? Did you protect the purity of your vision from the demands of the crowd? When you divorce your identity from the shifting, unreliable metrics of the internet and anchor it to the immovable rock of private integrity, you become unshakable. You are no longer a victim to the algorithm's judgment. You are the architect of your own sovereign reality. You realize that 1,000 shallow approvals cannot outweigh the profound peace of a single, aligned, obedient action. Part 3. Scriptural discernment. In a filtered world, we have established the fraudulent architecture of the digital space and the heavy neurochemical toll it demands from your soul. Now we must arm ourselves. Psychology, sociology, and behavioral economics can diagnose the disease of modern comparison, but they cannot cure it. To dismantle an illusion of this magnitude, we require a weapon that operates entirely outside the constraints of time, algorithms, and human ego. We must resurrect scriptural discernment, the rigorous application of ancient, immutable wisdom to the fleeting, filtered matrix of the 21st century, deconstructing the illusion of the perfect life. The greatest vulnerability of the modern mind is its chronological arrogance, the subconscious belief that because we possess high-speed networks and generative technology, we have somehow outgrown the need for ancient wisdom. This is a fatal miscalculation. The human soul has not evolved, only the tools of its distraction have. The digital illusion of the perfect life is simply a high-tech iteration of the oldest deception in human history, the elevation of the created image over the creator's truth. High-speed networks now compress the highly curated highlight reels of billions of people into an inescapable, frictionless assault on your senses. It is an artificial reality matrix designed to make you believe that suffering is an anomaly, that struggle is a sign of failure, and that a frictionless, aesthetically pleasing existence is the ultimate human destination. For the individual carrying a heavy calling, navigating this matrix is an agonizing psychological trial. You are intimately acquainted with the grit, the setbacks, the absolute discipline, and the unglamorous weeping that accompanies true creation. Yet when you open a screen, you are bombarded by a sanitized reality where everyone else appears to be ascending effortlessly. The tension between your gritty, disciplined reality and their filtered fiction can breed a deep, corrosive cynicism. You know intellectually that the image is edited, yet your spirit still bruises under the weight of the comparison. Ancient scriptural wisdom slices through this deception with terrifying precision. Thousands of years ago, the sages and prophets identified this exact phenomenon, calling it a chasing after the wind or a vapor, translated from the ancient Hebrew word hevel. They understood that any identity built upon the applause of the crowd or the aesthetic of the moment is fundamentally temporal. It is a house built on shifting digital sand. The illusion of the perfect life is not just fake, it is fragile. One algorithm update, one shift in cultural trends, one server crash, and the entire edifice collapses. To survive this, you must adopt a hermeneutic of suspicion toward digital perfection. You must train your mind to look at a flawlessly curated feed and immediately recognize it as a vapor, a fleeting, weightless distraction. You anchor your spirit by remembering that true, generational power is never perfectly packaged for mass consumption. It is raw, it is scarred, and it is forged in the fires of obscurity. When you view the digital world through the lens of ancient permanence, the illusion loses its power over your peace. The spirit of comparison as a spiritual blockade. We must stop treating comparison merely as a bad habit or a psychological glitch. In the realm of high-level spiritual execution, the spirit of comparison is a hostile blockade. Its primary objective is not just to make you feel bad about yourself. Its ultimate objective is to deafen you to the specific instructions meant for your individual path. True sovereign leadership requires continuous, unbroken reception of divine intelligence. You need a specific blueprint for your calling. The mechanism of comparison forces your gaze to become lateral rather than vertical. Instead of looking up to the source of your purpose for your next strategic move, you look sideways at your peers, your competitors, and the digital avatars of people you do not even know. You begin to reverse engineer their success, attempting to graft their calling onto your life. This is a catastrophic error in spiritual architecture. A blueprint designed for a skyscraper will cause a suspension bridge to collapse. The internal conflict here is agonizing. You watch others seemingly bypass the wilderness and arrive at their promised land with ease. The temptation to abandon your unique, arduous path and simply copy their formula is overwhelming. But there is a profound biblical narrative that addresses this exact crisis of focus. When the Apostle Peter, having just been given his own difficult and painful mandate, looks at another disciple, John, and asks, "Lord, what about him?" The response he receives is the ultimate antidote to digital envy. What is that to you? You must follow me. This is the brutal, liberating truth you must internalize. What another person is doing, achieving, or projecting online is completely irrelevant to your mandate. The specific instructions required to build your legacy cannot be heard if you are constantly eavesdropping on someone else's calling. The spirit of comparison creates thick static on the frequency of revelation. You must sever the lateral gaze. Let them have their viral moments. Let them have their algorithmic fame. You are not building for the feed. You are building for eternity, and that requires absolute, unapologetic focus on your own divine blueprint. Filtering notifications through the lens of purpose. The theoretical understanding of discernment must eventually be translated into martial, daily practice. You cannot passively hope to avoid the traps of the attention economy. You must actively cultivate an ironclad discipline of the mind that filters every digital input. By default, the human brain processes social media notifications and curated feeds through the lens of personal inadequacy. Every update from a peer is subconsciously translated into a judgment. They are working harder than you. They are more blessed than you. They are more disciplined than you. You are running out of time. The sheer exhaustion of constantly defending your psyche against this onslaught is what leads to burnout. You cannot afford to leak cognitive and spiritual energy every time your phone screen illuminates. The transition from victim to victor requires the construction of a mental firewall. You must take every thought captive, interrogating every piece of digital data before it is allowed to enter your spiritual sanctuary. This involves a ruthless operational shift in your personal discipline. You must look at every notification, every post, and every digital interaction and ask a single, filtering question. Does this serve the sovereign purpose I have been assigned, or is it designed to trigger my inadequacy? If it is the latter, it is immediately discarded as irrelevant noise. You stop absorbing the internet and begin interrogating it. By shifting the filter from inadequacy to purpose, you strip the algorithm of its psychological leverage. You are no longer a passive consumer waiting to be told how to feel about your progress. You are an active auditor of your own attention. You realize that a notification is just a line of code, entirely powerless until you assign it meaning. When you assign it the meaning of noise, you reclaim the mental bandwidth necessary to hear the quiet, profound intuition required for high-level leadership and true creation. You stand impenetrable in a filtered world. Part 4. Auditing the digital soul. The realization that the digital environment is inherently hostile to your divine calling must be followed by a ruthless internal audit. Awareness without action is merely intellectual entertainment. If you have been submerged in the algorithmic mirror, measuring your sovereign worth against the synthetic success of the crowd, your spiritual infrastructure has sustained damage. It is time to assess the structural integrity of your inner world. We must transition from defensive posturing to active detoxification, implementing radical protocols to audit the digital soul, stop the hemorrhaging of your creative power, and reclaim the bandwidth required for your destiny. Implementing a radical digital fast to recalibrate the nervous system. The modern nervous system is chronically overstimulated to the point of spiritual paralysis. We must address this not as a minor inconvenience, but as a severe physiological and spiritual crisis. The only viable remedy to this state of perpetual hyperarousal is a radical, non-negotiable digital fast designed to forcefully silence the noise of the global crowd. To understand the necessity of this fast, you must examine the physiology of your daily connectivity. Every time you open a feed, your brain is forced to process an unnatural volume of data. The political outrage of a stranger, the heavily filtered vacation of a colleague, catastrophic global news, and hyper-targeted advertisements, all within a 10-second scroll. Your sympathetic nervous system is trapped in a permanent state of fight or flight, frantically attempting to categorize and survive this onslaught of disconnected information. In this state, the parasympathetic nervous system, the biological mechanism responsible for rest, deep digestion of truth, and spiritual regeneration, is almost never allowed to engage. You are mistaking the frantic consumption of data for actual conscious living. For the chosen one, this biological reality creates an agonizing internal conflict. You possess a deep-seated desire to be relevant, to understand the culture you are called to impact, and to be plugged into the movements of the world. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, is not just social anxiety, it masquerades as a professional or spiritual obligation. You convince yourself that you must consume the noise to understand the generation you are meant to lead. Yet, the more you consume, the more deaf you become to the sovereign voice that actually equips you to lead them. It feels irresponsible to disconnect, but it is unequivocally deadly to your calling to remain connected at this velocity. Ancient wisdom provides the definitive blueprint for this exact crisis. Look at the lineage of the great prophets, leaders, and architects of history. Their most profound transformations and clearest instructions never occurred in the town square or amidst the roar of the crowd. Moses ascended the mountain into thick clouds. Jesus retreated to the desolate wilderness. Elijah sought the profound silence of the cave. A digital fast is not a punishment for a lack of discipline. It is a sacred recalibration of your soul's receiver. It is the intentional withdrawal from the frequency of the masses so that you can lock on to the frequency of the divine. You must initiate a structural severing of digital ties. This is not about taking a screen break for an afternoon. It is about deliberately starving the dopamine receptors and enduring the uncomfortable, echoing silence that follows. You must strip away the artificial input so that the organic output of your soul can run pure again. Only when the deafening static of the world is muted will you realize how loudly your purpose has been calling out to you. Recognizing and sealing spiritual leakage. As the noise of the crowd fades, we must address a more insidious threat to your calling: spiritual leakage. The modern impulse to broadcast every passing thought, minor milestone, and half-formed idea results in catastrophic energy loss, hemorrhaging the power of deep-rooted projects long before they have the chance to mature. The architecture of social media demands the immediate externalization of your internal processes. The platforms incentivize you to build in public, to share your journey, and to announce your intentions to the world. But there is a devastating psychological trap hidden in this culture of oversharing. When you announce a massive vision or a sacred project to the internet, your brain receives a premature surge of dopamine from the crowd's applause and congratulations. Your neurochemistry registers the announcement as an actual accomplishment. By receiving the cheap, immediate reward of social validation, you destroy the hunger and the internal pressure required to actually execute the difficult, unglamorous work of bringing the vision to life. You trade the structural integrity of your destiny for the fleeting high of an announcement. This creates a tragic cycle for visionary individuals. You receive a seed of divine inspiration, a blueprint for a business, a manuscript, a movement, and the excitement is overwhelming. The pressure of the attention economy whispers that if you do not post about it, it does not exist. So you expose the seed to the glaring artificial light of the internet before it has even developed roots. But seeds require darkness, pressure, and subterranean isolation to germinate. When you expose a deep-rooted project prematurely, the scrutiny, the unsolicited opinions, and the sheer energetic dissipation cause the vision to abort. You look back at a graveyard of announced intentions that never materialized, not because you lacked the talent, but because the energy was leaked through the cracks of overexposure. You must learn the terrifying ancient discipline of containment. The womb is dark for a reason. The Holy of Holies was hidden behind a thick veil. Power is accumulated through secrecy and sustained focus. It dissipates when it is scattered to the wind. Cast not your pearls before swine is not an insult to your audience. It is a vital protective measure for your most precious revelations. Not everyone is spiritually equipped to handle the weight of your blueprint. You must audit your sharing habits ruthlessly. Stop substituting the fiction of execution with the fiction of public relations. Let the profound silence of your labor be the incubator for your genius. Seal the leaks in your spirit. Keep your profoundest work hidden in the vault of your private devotion until it is so undeniable, so fully formed, that when you finally release it into the world, it breaks the algorithm rather than bending to it. Reclaiming mental bandwidth for high-level intuition. The ultimate objective of the digital fast and the sealing of spiritual leaks is not merely to find peace, it is to reclaim the mental bandwidth necessary to hear the quiet intuition required for high-level leadership and paradigm shifting. Creativity. Mental bandwidth is the most valuable, finite resource you possess, and the attention economy is designed to strip mine it until absolutely nothing remains. Creativity, strategic foresight, and spiritual leadership are not brute force computations. You cannot simply think harder to solve complex generational problems. These high-level functions are acts of reception. They require profound cognitive margin. When your mental bandwidth is completely maxed out by scrolling, engaging in digital arguments, maintaining parasocial relationships, and processing the curated anxieties of the globe, the channels required for high-level synthesis are choked. The brain simply does not have the processing power left to innovate, to strategize, or to commune with the divine. The modern trap is the belief that consuming more information will make us better, sharper, and more equipped to lead. We hoard podcasts, save endless articles, and drown ourselves in thought leadership threads, resulting in a state of intellectual constipation. The chosen one often feels blocked, stuck, and overwhelmed, not because they lack capacity or calling, but because they simply lack space. The quiet, still voice of intuition, which carries the exact blueprint for your next sovereign move, is being entirely drowned out by the roar of irrelevant, low-tier data. Stillness is the absolute prerequisite for sovereignty. Be still, and know is not a gentle suggestion for relaxation. It is a martial command for cognitive clarity. The highest frequencies of intelligence and divine instruction operate at a whisper. You cannot command a movement, architect a masterpiece, or step into a high calling while your mind is fractured into 1,000 open browser tabs. To reclaim your calling, you must fiercely protect your cognitive load. You must treat your attention as a sacred currency, refusing to spend it on the algorithmic circus. By clearing the cache of your mind, you create the vast, silent expanse required for true inspiration to strike. You transition from a frantic consumer of digital noise into a centered, lethal executor of divine will. This reclaimed bandwidth is the very foundation upon which your ultimate defense will be built, the protocols of sovereign focus. Part 5. The Sovereign Focus Protocols. We have audited the soul, purged the digital toxins, and reclaimed the vast mental bandwidth required for divine instruction. However, a cleared mind in a hostile environment will not remain clear for long. If you step back into the digital ecosystem without a structural defense, the algorithm will simply recolonize your attention. We must move from the defensive posture of fasting into the offensive posture of fortification. It is time to establish the sovereign focus protocols, the martial, non-negotiable systems that ensure you dictate the terms of your engagement with the modern world. You are no longer prey to the attention economy, you are the architect of your own perimeter, establishing the morning anchor in reality. You cannot survive the shifting synthetic sands of the internet without first establishing an immovable anchor in physical and spiritual reality. The battle for your sovereign identity is fought and won in the first 60 minutes of your day. Let us examine the mechanism of the morning. When you wake, your brain transitions from the deep restorative delta waves into the highly impressionable alpha and theta states. It is a moment of profound neurological vulnerability. If the very first action you take is to reach for your phone and open a feed, you are committing a catastrophic tactical error. You are allowing the algorithm, the anxieties of the masses, and the curated perfection of strangers to write the baseline code for your entire day. You instantly surrender your physiological and spiritual sovereignty to a machine, throwing your nervous system into immediate reactive chaos. The chosen one experiences a massive internal conflict at dawn. There is an anxious, almost gravitational pull to immediately check in on the world, driven by a deep-seated fear of missing a crucial update, an important email, or a shift in the cultural tide. You convince yourself that a leader must be informed, but the tension lies between the anxiety of absence and the absolute necessity of grounded presence. You cannot lead a generation if your emotional state is being dictated by the chaotic, unvetted data of the global crowd before your feet have even touched the floor. Ancient wisdom is unequivocally clear on this protocol. Across millennia, the most formidable spiritual leaders, Stoics and prophets, shared one universal discipline, the primacy of the morning. They understood that you must tune the instrument of your spirit to the frequency of the divine before the world has a chance to strike it. The morning is not for consumption, it is for calibration. You must anchor yourself in the eternal before you engage with the ephemeral. To execute this protocol, you must build a ruthless analog firewall around the first hour of your day. The device remains in another room. You do not touch a screen until you have touched reality. You read the ancient texts, you sit in unbroken silence, you engage with the physical world, and you establish your sovereign identity. By the time you finally open the digital gates, your spirit is so heavily anchored in truth that the illusions of the algorithmic mirror shatter upon impact. You do not react to the internet must react to you. Building the fortress of focus. Once the morning anchor is set, you must construct a fortress of focus to protect your high calling throughout the day from the predatory nature of the attention economy. A calling without boundaries is not a calling, it is a vulnerability. The mechanism of the modern digital landscape is inherently predatory. It functions as a siege engine against your prefrontal cortex. The platforms deploy notifications, badges, infinite scrolls, and algorithmic friction to fracture your deep work into thousands of shallow, useless microtasks. They weaponize your own psychological desire for completion and connection, turning your phone into an unpredictable slot machine of minor emergencies and trivial dopamine hits. If you leave your gates unguarded, this economy will strip mine your cognitive reserves until you have nothing left to offer your true purpose. The internal conflict for the visionary is the fear of being unreachable. You desire to be a servant leader, to be accessible to your community, and to remain responsive to opportunities. Establishing harsh digital boundaries feels deeply unnatural, almost arrogant. The ego whispers that if you stop responding instantly, people will forget you, the momentum will die, and you will become irrelevant. You are torn between the demand to serve the people and the absolute necessity to serve the mission. Here, we must look to the ancient blueprint of Nehemiah. Tasked with the monumental sovereign duty of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem, he was constantly badgered, mocked, and summoned by his enemies and distractors who wanted to pull him away from his deep work. His response is the ultimate manifesto for the chosen one. I'm carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? He recognized that every distraction, no matter how urgently it presented itself, was an attack on the mandate. You must adopt the Nehemiah Protocol. Building your fortress of focus is a holy act of preservation. Turn off every non-essential notification. Implement ruthless time blocking where your devices are silenced and placed out of sight. You must train your colleagues, your audience, and your own brain that your accessibility is a privilege, not a right. Your focus is the sacred currency that buys your destiny. Guard it with the ferocity of a soldier defending the perimeter. Let the trivial fires burn. You are building an empire, transitioning from digital identity to digital utility. The ultimate victory over modern comparison culture is not a complete retreat into the woods. It is the absolute subjugation of the digital realm. We must transition into a lifestyle where digital tools serve the sovereign mission rather than defining the identity of the chosen. Understand the fundamental mechanism of technology. It is inherently neutral. The internet, the platforms, the algorithms, they are merely force multipliers. They magnify whatever is placed into them. When a user lacks a solidified sovereign identity, the tool becomes the master. The platform extracts the user's labor, data, and self-worth, offering synthetic validation in return. But when a user approaches the platform with an identity forged in the fires of divine purpose, the dynamic inverts. The master becomes the tool. The final conflict you will face is the ego's desperate, lingering desire to be known by the machine. Even as you detach, there is a temptation to perform your detachment for an audience, to make your digital minimalism a new aesthetic to be validated. It is the hardest death to die, the death of the digital avatar. You must surrender the illusion that your worth is somehow connected to your reach. You must accept that your most profound generational impact may never go viral, and you must be entirely at peace with that reality. The anchoring wisdom for this final stage is the ancient principle of being in the world, but not of it. As a chosen one, you are deployed into the digital matrix to execute a mission, but your operating system is downloaded from a higher server. You utilize the high-speed networks to broadcast truth, to disrupt the algorithmic darkness with profound light, and to gather the scattered remnants of your true community. But you do not seek their applause. You use the platform, you do not let the platform use you. This is the ultimate sovereign focus protocol, the complete detachment of your soul from your screen. You write the script, you build the architecture, you deliver the message, and then, with absolute unbothered peace, you close the application. You step away from the glowing glass and return to the grit, the silence, and the profound beauty of your real sovereign life. You have dismantled the algorithmic mirror. You have starved the spirit of comparison. You have audited your soul and built your fortress. The noise of the crowd has faded into a distant, irrelevant hum. Now, in the profound and powerful silence, there is only you and the mandate you were born to fulfill. The digital world is waiting for your truth.